What's up, Nissan Nation? This is Jason from Toyota Trucks and Trails. David's being a bum again and didn't want to do an intro for this episode, but I decided I'd go ahead and do it. Anyway, this is a conversation between David and Luke Pankow about solid axle and a Nissan Xterra. Enjoy.
The views and opinions of the Nissan Nation podcast are simply that. They are views and opinions of its guests or hosts. They do not reflect Nissan corporate or otherwise. Now, a DRB and KGB media presentation, the Nissan Nation podcast. Hit it, Kelly.
Recorded live, coast to coast, it's the Nissan Nation podcast. From camping, racing, and all points in between. The NNP is your Nissan Nation podcast. Now start your engines and welcome in your hosts, David, Danny, and Holden.
What is going on, Nissan Nation? From all things Nissan here in the United States of America to parts around the globe, this is your Nissan Nation podcast. Thank you for my buddy, Mr. Jason Hoffman of the Toyota Trucks and Trails for nudging me along to finish up this episode. I was going to have this thing out Monday the 18th or so, and just life got in the way. So Jason reminded me last night to finish this episode up. So that's what I'm going to do, guys. So I hope you guys are having a great start to summer. Almost official here in the States. I forget what the 22nd, I think, is our summer equinox or whatever they call it. It's hot, hot, hot here in the South. We know how to do a few things. We know barbecue. We know apple pies, and we know how to have a humid summer. So luckily I'm in some air condition right now, and I'm gonna enjoy that because I work outside for a living. And as you hear, that's the Diet Mountain Dew. So let me get a big gulp of that. Pow. So how are you guys doing? We don't get to talk a lot. You guys, well, I talk to you guys, but you never talk back, which we're hoping that will change. So we've got a couple things coming up. We've got a contest coming up, and we haven't finalized the details, so I don't want to give how we're doing it, but I will tell you what you're getting. So what we are looking for is you and a buddy or two who are Nissan buddies to you get to host the show. Yeah, it's crazy as that sounds. You will get to host the show. Somewhere between episode whatever this one is, 72 or 3, from 100, we're going to record a show that's just the fans doing it. They're doing their own podcast. I will record it. I will have zero input on how you do it. Input on how you do the intros, whatever, but this is going to be fun. We're giving you guys a chance to play podcast hosts. So you've got that coming up. We've got all kinds of things coming up. We're in summertime. In July, I'm heading down to the ATL to Regal Nissan. We are bumping up our YouTube, guys. I know if you go over there now, you're going to see some stuff from 2015 or 14 of me and Danny in SoCal together at a car show. And then you're going to see a lot of podcasts in between. But we are looking to amp up our video side of this production. And so if there's something you guys want to know about, like I said, I'm going to hopefully test drive 5 or 6 cars down at Regal and do give you some opinions on them. I know they've got the new kicks in, so I'm kind of excited to drive that. I know we won't be the first to talk about it, but we will be the best because we are Nissan based, and that's all you can ask for. But no, I was watching YouTubes the other day, and my people were actually going to have on this show coming up. I tried first year, but the fast lane trucks, they do all kinds of stuff. The fast lane cars as well, but they do all kinds of fun stuff. They sent a young man out to SoCal, and they got to test drive that kick. So I watched that video the other day, and I've seen other people that car shows that I watch and respect also get to test out that kick. So I want to kick it around a little bit. And speaking of kicking around, we've let's get into some news. So hit it, Brez. All right. So thank you once again to Mr. Stephen Breslin of the G Packs. If you're in the greater Pennsylvania area and you're in Xterra, I imagine they like Nissans of all kinds. But go check those guys out, man. They do a lot of good for. They're doing some fundraisers for cancer and all kinds of cool stuff. So go check those guys out. Nissan, man, they're still licking their wounds from the big, we'll call it the crash of April. But they're coming back. I was told by some inside sources that there's been a different philosophy now. So no more rental cars, or not as many rental cars to boost up numbers. So that's why we've seen these numbers kind of go down. But let's see. Let's take a look. Nissan for May 2017 had sold 124,957 cars. Sounds like a lot, but this year they've sold 120,207 cars. So they are down about 3.8%, which is not actually bad. I feel like the boom of cars is starting to slow down. I think that's why GM and everybody was like, no, we're not going to show you our numbers anymore. We're going to do them quarterly, and that's it. But Nissan, they're chugging along, man. The long in the tooth Versa, he's down a little bit. He 6,576 from 9,006 in 17. The Sentra still kicking along, man. I'm not even going to bother with that. Altima's holding its own. Even with them talking about a refresh coming up, it's holding its own. Maxima's down quite a bit, but it's due for I can go through this, man. It's like every car they do is kind of due for a refresh. So get ready. The 370Z, man, it's the little car that doesn't want to keep going. Their sales went from 447 last year at this time to 343. But Nissan's not made any kind of they've not announced anything what their plans are with that car, and I think there's already 2019 pricing, so maybe 2020, who knows. Actually, GTR sales are up. In 2017, they sold 65 of them at this point in the year, and they're up to 74. So maybe it's all those cool Nismo, or maybe it's that rocket ship race car that they decided to start selling. Let's get to the truck line, my favorite. Frontier. Frontier sold 7,756 trucks this time last year, and they are at 6,938. Guys, I know that we say it all the time. That is not, that's nowhere near, what the Tacoma and all that truck does. But, guys, the Tacoma and those trucks also aren't like 15, 16 years old. And this time last year, total, they had sold, 29,669, and it's actually up 17%. They've sold 34,845. So, I mean, I love mine. I've owned 3 of them now. For some reason, they just keep doing it, man. They are outselling Titan. I will say that. Nissan pushes Titan hard. And it's it deserves to be. I own one, and it's a hell of a truck. But it seems like they're slowly sinking back down to where the Generation 1 Titan was. So this time last year, they sold 4,937 of them. And this year, they've sold 3,779. So you do the math on that one. They're down about 5.4%. Could be a timing thing. You never know. Contractors are strange how they buy vehicles, and of course the Titan seems to be the guy looking for just a truck to have in his driveway. Xterra still shows up on this, trips me out. I think it's because they sold one last year, so it just has to be on here. But there's 0 sales. Pathfinder, we had hinted around that maybe Nissan calls the next body on frame SUV, the Pathfinder, before. With the sales it's doing, I don't know how they could do it. They're still selling about 6,000 of those. That's pretty crazy. Armada's about flat right now. Rogue is up. So this time last year they sold 32,533 of those little CUVs, as I call them, and this year they have sold 38,413. I got a feeling Holden maybe at least 3 of those. I can't confirm nor deny that, but I'm gonna say those last 3 were Holdens. That little car, it's due for a refresh coming up too. Murano's still selling about 6,000. Quest, I know, and this is the part of the show that I know we need bumper music for or something. Quest, guys, this time last year they sold 384 of those. Couldn't sell Xterra anymore at the 15 to 2,000 they were selling a month, but Quest kept on chugging till now, since they've never officially killed it, but they've sold 0. So I'm going to guess there's no more on the dealer's lots. Envy sold 1,702. Let's see, Envy 200, keeping up with the big Envy. It's 1,691. So this time last year, they sold 64,456 trucks. This time this year, they have sold 66,739. They are up a few percentage points. That's always good. Seems like the car line right now, is in kind of chaos. It's not Nissan's fault. I really think that some of Ford's deciding they only want to sell maybe 2 car lines has kind of freaked everybody out. I mean, car buyers, we're a tricky group now, man. Everybody pays attention to everything on social media, so that has to scare through all of them. I'll have to look into GM and everybody else's numbers, but I bet they're down a little bit because people are like, no more cars. Actually, let's get into total North American produced vehicles. They've this time last year they've sold 91,488. The magic number this year so far is 91,906. That is I love seeing the North American produced vehicles. I love the fact that everybody, all the big 3 are scared to build a car here in the what they call home, and Nissan says, "Here, hold my beer. I've got this, American auto workers. We don't need your unions, nor do we need your, you being here. We'll take care of this, guys. We got this." But I love seeing that number, man. I'd love to see it even more than what it is. Infinity, let's see what we got for Infinity. Their numbers, they've sold this time last year, they're actually down a little bit. So they sold 12,514 last year. Infinity total numbers. This year they have sold 11,625. Anything, let's see, the QX50 is a big one. It's up quite a bit. Anything else on this list? Nope. Nothing standing out for that. So that is our Nissan by the numbers. Nissan by the numbers is brought to you by Regal Nissan. If you are in the greater ATL area and you are, hey Australia guys, if you just happen to want to come up here and buy a vehicle, go see our buddies over at Regal. They are in North Atlanta, and they will give you a hell of a deal. They also ship a ton of parts. So if you need some OEM parts, man, these guys are ridiculous on how much they just want to move product. They're going to beat, if they can, they're going to beat somebody's price just to sell the part. So give our buddies over there at Regal Nissan a little bit of love on the socials, man, and tell them you heard about them on the NNP. You can get them over at regalnissan.com or Regal Parts. I think regalpartsonline.com as well. Tell our little southern friends you said hi, and tell them to leave a light on for you, or whatever that hotel thing commercial was about. So let's see, Nissan, they are adding the color studio. I mean, it was a major popular thing with the Juke, and I guess they killed the Juke. So why not add it to the Kicks, which is like Juke 2.0. The color studio, where you can personalize your Nissan. They've talked about that a little bit. They are, let's see what else we got here. I had a couple things. I know this dead air here sounds horrible, but I had a couple things here I wanted to talk about. Nissan is searching for the fastest Gran Turismo gamers. Nissan is looking for the next generation of fast PlayStation gamers with a new program that gives thousands of racers the chance to compete in an official FIA championship. There was a TV show on several years ago where they were looking for guys that played video games to for their next factory racers. It was an awesome show. I think they ended that, but it looks like they're bringing something back, man. So that is super cool. Nissan to race in 12 cities worldwide during Formula E's 5th season. Nissan will race in 12 cities on 4 continents during the season 5 of the ABB FIA Formula E Championship. That is a mouthful to say, using your radio voice. But that's about all the news. I know my numbers there. Nissan by the numbers. That can get quite taxing to want to listen to. But if you're a Nissan fan as me, you pay attention to those because you're excited to see where the brand is going and trends. So there you go. So let's just get into this, guys. So me and Luke Pankow from Lifestyle Offroad and 515 Racing, we've been buddies for 10 years now or so. We've kind of grown up a little bit in the sporting side of off-roading. I've off-roaded, I say professionally, for 20 years now, being a land surveyor and in the Middle Tennessee area, so I'm always going off-road. But as a hobby, about 10 years. And me and Luke hooked up on Club Xterra back in the day. A pretty major, old major forum, and met the first time we ever met was at Windrock, man. So I don't know if that's why that place is so special to me, him or what, but we've just taken our vehicles. It seems like when one does something, one has to do the same, or not one up the next person, but if somebody upgrades, our styles are pretty much the same. So I think that's why we seem to match each other's vehicles. But a few years back, I know if you've been listening to the show since 15, you know about my troubles with sassing my vehicle. I get into it a little bit in this interview, but about a year in, Luke did that hold my beer thing, and over the weekend he sassed his. But we went completely different routes, but our path is taking us kind of in the same direction to solid axle our vehicles. And I wanted to really get into this. This is a tough topic. Because we all drive different things. I mean, half my audience is a car enthusiast, and the other half is trucks. So, car guys, sorry, I don't know. There's really an axle swap for you that we could talk about, but we get into this tough subject because over the years, here in the States, like the Nissan, somewhere around 82, I think is when they kind of 83, somewhere in there, they went away with straight axled 4-wheel drive vehicles, and they went to the independent front suspension. Independent front suspension, clearly, it's been around for 30 some years now, so it is the future, as you can say. But it loses something, and like I said, we get into this a little bit, and when you're off-roading a vehicle and you're putting larger tires on it, it's just a natural progression. If you're wanting to take your abilities to the next level, you're going to have to kind of take your vehicle to the next level. And so we get into that a little bit. So without further ado, let's get into the interview with Mr. Luke Pankow of 515 Racing and Lifestyle Offroad. All right, so today we have Mr. Luke Pankow with 515 Racing and Lifestyle Offroad. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how are you?
Doing good, man. I see you're in your shop I see videos playing behind you, and so where are you at right now?
So I am at the 515 Racing shop here in Des Moines, Iowa. It is pretty new. I've been doing this since last August, but we've only been in our shop since the beginning of May. So we sell a lot of apparel. We've got a whole bunch of 515 branded stuff. And our big thing is promoting rider safety. So we have the slogan, Ride Safe, Ride Smart. And we promote rider safety through selling helmets and educating people on what kind of helmet they should wear, why they should wear a helmet, and things like that. So we sell helmets for motocross, snowmobiles, cars, motorcycles, street bikes, pretty much anything. If it's got a motor, we've got a helmet that you can wear to do your sport safely.
Is there a big difference in, because I have paid attention to your website, is there a big difference in helmets, I mean, for different motorsports?
There is. So I'm loosely starting to get into kind of like autocross and drag racing with cars. If you're going to go do autocross, you can actually wear like a motorcycle rated helmet, and then there's auto rated helmets. The actual shell of the helmet, for the most part, is pretty much the same. But when you go an auto helmet versus just a strict motorcycle, auto helmets have a lot of flame retardant materials because you're in an enclosed vehicle and you might crash and it might start on fire.
You don't want your head to be on fire?
Right. So you want to help protect your head. So like the straps on an auto racing helmet, they're made out of Kevlar. All the padding is flame retardant. Both helmets, whether it's a motorcycle or an auto, they have puncture resistance. So that way some debris flying or whatever, the helmets will help protect you from punctures. But compared to like a dirt bike helmet, they're going to be a little bit heavier because they add that puncture resistance.
Right. Well, is there a life expectancy on a helmet?
5 years.
So it's like a child's car seat kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, anymore it really is, and it's kind of along the same guidelines. They just say after 5 years, the glue and the foam and the plastics all start to break down. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with your head, and you can't do much without a head, so it's worth the investment to spend $100 and get a good helmet versus $25 on some used one that's who knows how old.
Yeah, going to your local yard sale and finding a helmet from the 60s.
Right. Well, and a couple years ago, it became a big thing to get these vintage helmets from the 70s and 80s to ride your vintage motorcycle.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's not doing much more than wearing the baseball hat that you've got on your head because it's probably going to crumble if there's an impact.
Right, and yeah, I mean, and then I know, because you guys sell them. I mean, there are vintage style new helmets out there, so it's for safety.
Oh yeah,
wise.
Yeah. So you can look cool and have your vintage look, but it can be brand new and up to today's safety standards.
Right. I know the cafe guys. They seem to be the really cafe bike guys. They're the ones that really want all the vintage stuff and.
Right.
Well, so that was 515. You're a man of many things. Of course, I've known you for years, but. You also have a lifestyle off-road, and we've talked about it a little bit before, but give a little bit of background with it.
So lifestyle off-road is the project that I started and didn't even realize I was getting into it. I started making stickers for, I think what really kicked it off is when we ran the SEX Stera Club and we needed stickers, so I had a little plotter and started making them. And then all of a sudden it turned into this club wanted them, and then that club wanted them, and I made friends with another company who does shirt printing. So I was able to start offering shirts, and then now I offer wraps, hats, hoodies, pretty much anything. So events like Went Windrock and Gone Moab, when you get your goodie bag, I probably made I made most of what's in it. I made the event shirt, I made the hats, I made the event sticker. So, that's my favorite thing to do, is be able to be that one-stop shop where you can come to me, you've got a club, an event, whatever, and I can supply you with everything versus having to go to 4 or 5 different vendors to get everything to put your event together.
Right. Which I know for Went, man, that was a big, because we used to outsource a lot of stuff like that, and it was always a pain in the butt, and deadlines. Like at least with one company, you at least know your deadline, or they know your deadline, and they have a good idea when they need to get it to you.
Right. Well, and you're not chasing down 4 different contacts and trying to get 4 different designs approved. I mean, we still have to approve designs, but for the most part, everything complies with the shirt matches the sticker and the hat and whatever. So
right. I can only imagine your pain though of like trying to get art finalized from some places, and it's
sometimes it's a treat, but at the end of the day, when I get to go to those events and see everything, and I can walk around going, I made that. That's what's rewarding to me about it.
Right. Well, I know for what you've done for us, man, we've sent stuff to Australia. We've sent stuff to South America. Like the idea, it's always trips me out that when you take an idea of like this podcast or whatever you do now, and then, you see your buddies kind of they get their stickers and stuff. You're like, okay, well, that's cool. But then when it's like in different countries now, that's always cool to me.
Right. No, I remember when I made, no, it was a shirt. It was a lifestyle shirt. And a guy messaged me and asked if I'd ship it to Costa Rica. And I was so excited. I'm like, dude, I'll ship it to you for free. I don't even care. Like, as long as you're buying it and you're going to wear it, tell all your friends. And I threw a bunch of stickers and stuff in there. And he thought it looked cool and he needed to have it. So
yeah.
I totally understand that excitement.
Well, speaking of needing to have, I know with the company you're with, the 515, like you guys sell all kinds of shirts and
yep.
And there is a website for this stuff too, right?
It's just 515racing.com.
Is it the numbers 515?
Yep, numbers 515. And you can even go like us on Facebook and through Instagram, and our store is directly linked to that also.
Well,
so you can actually buy stuff off of Facebook, and we ship anywhere. Our shipping rates are super cheap for the most part, even too.
Well, will y'all ship me that truck that's behind you, because that looks really cool.
Well, I don't know. Mine's over there.
Oh, not that one. Nobody cares about the Xterra. It's that big dually y'all have sitting over there, man. That's wicked. We'll be sure to post up for the people that don't get the visual that I get. We'll post up some pictures of the 515 truck. We seen it at Went last year, but it always trips me out. And then y'all have the 515 trailer there that makes me jealous because I want to turn that into a mobile podcast studio. But so far, people aren't buying enough patches for me to afford to do that.
Yeah, those are pricey trailers.
I think that's our first walk around as we podcast, man. That you're just able to to do the walk around.
That's the benefit of an iPad, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So what we really brought you on today was to talk about sassing your Nissan. And what we talk about today is going to be real generalized because everything is different. With Xterra, you've got a Gen 1, Gen 2. The Pathfinder sometimes works a little bit with some of this stuff. The Frontier and Xterra seem to blend together pretty good. And I know hard bodies are a little different too. So please do not, if you are the expert on the Frontier or you're the expert on a Pathfinder, an old 80s Pathfinder, don't beat us up here, guys. It's what we're talking about is generalized stuff. We want to get out to the audience of, what is sassing. And Luke, go into what is sassing just a little bit.
So some people, SAS stands for solid axle swap. Some people say straight axle. There's not really a right from wrong. I've always said solid axle. But what it is you're removing the front independent suspension off your vehicle, and then you're adding a solid front axle, such as like a Dana 44 or Dana 60, to the front of your vehicle for, in most cases, it's for added durability. At least that's why I did it.
Right. And I know that too, that's what sold me down that path. But so why, you say durability, kind of explain to people, what is the limitation of an IFS suspension system? So
if you and I have wheeled together for, I think, probably 10 years now.
Yeah, almost.
The Xterra is, in my mind, the most durable when it's bone stock. We've taken your poor little Stan out to Woolies, and it followed two other trucks that were much more built, and you made it through all the same stuff we did.
Minus that brake line problem we had.
Yeah, right. But they, in stock form, the suspension, all the angles are correct. You're not overly straining anything. You can just beat and beat and beat on them, and they'll go and go, and they will just take it and keep on running.
Which trips me out because we've taken a lot of rookie off-roaders out, and they were all. I remember a group that we took to Windrock one time, and like we went over a bridge at Windrock on Trail 22, the little entrance to it, and we went maybe a half mile down the road, and we stopped to let our group kind of catch up. And I remember people getting out of the truck going, "I can't believe these trucks can do this," and you're like, "It's a 4-wheel drive, guys." So, I mean, yeah,
right. And there was even another time when we got back when there was a Trail 3. And I think at the time I might have had a locker, and there was a couple people in the group that just had like a tiny little 1-inch lift, but other than that were pretty well stock. And they were going up the same trail that we were, and it almost was frustrating because it's like, why have I just spent all this money?
right.
And this guy just, sure, he's rougher on it, but he's making it up the same trail. But at the end of the day, you want to look cool. So you want to put the big tires on, you want to lift it, and that you start to more or less limit yourself because now you're going to go down the trail and your tire, instead of being 40 pounds at each corner, is 80 pounds at each corner, and you've lifted it up so the A-arms are angled down, it's stressing the ball joints, you're pulling on the CV joints, it's a lot of stress on the tie rods. So it's just a matter of time. It's not really an if, it's when you're going to break something. So once I got to the point that I re-geared and I added a locker, you can do the harder trails with a lot more ease, and so you start pushing yourself. And that's what, to me, four-wheeling is all about. It's about seeing if you can drive up that steep hill, make it over that rock, make it through that ravine. So you want your vehicle to be able to keep up with your capabilities as a driver. And in most cases, the IFS becomes a large limiting factor because it'll end a lot of your days on the trail because you'll be sitting there underneath it trying to fix it versus keep going down the trail and seeing bigger, better things.
Well, I know me and you for years were like, we never wanted to get into sassing. We were like, I know for me especially, I was happy with the trails that I was doing, and it's, for me, like, it's not about being ballsy and just wanting to climb up every ledge you can find, but it was, I was comfortable with what we were doing, and I could take the truck and go have fun. I could drive it home, and that was the biggest part of the day. And so until like the durability issue came up for me, that was never really a factor.
Right, and I would agree with that. And really, what you and I really had very similar stories, because we could do a lot of trails that, just for an example, a Jeep would say we couldn't, and you and I would go down there and we'd putt through it, and they'd be kind of in disbelief because this little Xterra on 33s just went up the trail that their Jeep on 35s did.
Right.
And that was exciting. It was kind of fun to break hearts, for so to speak, on a trail like that.
Just pulling into some parks, you're breaking hearts, man. So
right. But for me, what it was is I was leading trails that went Windrock, and we got into a really difficult section on a black trail, and I bashed in my gas tank, and that wasn't a huge deal, but if I would have had a little bit bigger of a lift, a little bit taller tires, it probably wouldn't have happened. Well, I finally get my group unstuck, and then I'm trying to go down the trail again. Well, then I ripped the ball joint out, and then after I ripped the ball joint out, then I pulled the CV axle out and broke it. And then later on that weekend, I broke a tie rod. So I had to replace all those parts just to keep going, and then I'm putting comparable parts back in because I was running the highest grade parts you could, and it was a lot of wrenching on my vacation that I should be having fun at.
Right.
And you get to a point where how many CV axles do you really want to carry? How many ball joints do you really want to carry? I had 2 center links. I had, 5, 6, 7 tie rod ends. I had 3 ball joints, and that puts stress on your vehicle just trying to carry it all around.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then, you think with the IFS, IFS rides so much better. So if you're thinking about, I just want to build a big truck, you really don't need to go this route because it is a better system for daily use.
It absolutely is.
But like you said, there's some limitations to what you can do to it. And I know with like the early Frontiers and the Xteras, you know, they use idler arms and their center links aren't built for what does it come with, a 28-inch tire, I think, from the factory?
Yeah, 28 or 29. They kind of went all over the place, but
it's a thin, I had a 10.5 wide tire, if that. It's not made for the heavy tires that you're putting on these things.
Right. Yeah, it's not a terrible system because it's something. Really, a 2004 Xterra is not that different underneath from a 1988 Nissan hardbody pickup.
Right. There's
some differences, but it's more or less the same. So it's obviously worked because it worked for 16 years. It's when you, like I said, when you want to push yourself and you want to go and see bigger, better things and do bigger obstacles, it starts to not be very efficient.
Well, I think for off-roading too, you look at, of course, you know, Jeep rules the roost. Nobody can say it doesn't as far as what it does. But you know, the type of off-roading that's popular now, 20 years ago, really wasn't that popular. There wasn't a ton of places, especially on the East Coast. There wasn't a ton of places to do it, so there was no need to build your vehicles up like we do. So if you think about 20 years ago, the Toyota and everybody's designs, what they relied on, it wasn't built to what they called off-roading back then was a gravel road, you know.
Right. Yeah, it was much different. Even Moab used to be significantly different. It didn't even used to be a town. I have a friend whose dad has always driven an old CJ7, and I showed him pictures after my first time in Moab, and he couldn't believe it. Because way back then, in the late 70s, early 80s, he's like, there wasn't really even a town there. I think there was maybe a gas station, and they didn't even have access to all the trails because there was no way to really relay the information what trails there really even were.
Yeah, because once in the 60s or 70s, once the uranium dried up in the area, like it was a ghost town kind of.
Right. So, no, I agree with that. Off-roading has changed significantly in the last 20, 25 years.
So other than Jeep really being their design, we'll say it's a very barbaric, you know, a straight axles of the way they did it too early on was very barbaric. It was, you know, some leaf springs up front and rear. You had this big heavy axle. Like the community came to them. It right. wasn't like the community grew and they developed the vehicle for it. So Jeep was in a very good place of hey, we have a vehicle that's made to get the shit beat out of it, and now we're doing it. What is going on, everybody? Let me talk to you a little bit about Lifestyle Off-Road. What is Lifestyle Off-Road? What do they do? Well, let me tell you, they make custom t-shirts, they make custom graphics, stickers, you name it. They also have their own line of clothing. I wear a lot of it, man. I personally like their designs and what they do and how they support, you know, the off-road community and especially the Nissan community. So if you need something from custom stickers, you know, I love you grandma, whatever you want to put on your car, maybe family reunion t-shirts, maybe t-shirts for your club or event, give them a shout over there at www.lifestyleoffroad.com or check them out on Facebook at Lifestyle Off-Road. Be sure to tell them that NNP sent you. So Jeep was in a good place of, you know, the community grew to them. As backwards as that sounds, the primitive vehicle found a use, you know, like 30 years after the fact. It was always thought of as a rugged vehicle, you know?
Yeah, well, and its military background definitely helped that. And when you go to a solid axle, people compare it to a Jeep a lot more. But Jeeps aren't the only ones using a solid axle. Most 3/4 ton, 1 ton pickups still use a solid axle just because they're more rugged, more durable, less moving parts, and they're actually easier to maintain even too. So a solid axle just has that durability that everybody's seeking.
Right. And if, just the IFS has all these moving parts.
Right.
Exposed
because you have
moving parts.
What's that?
They're exposed moving parts,
Right. Well, and that's the other thing. And when you tear apart a front differential, and of course I'm referencing one from an Xterra because I don't have a ton of experience with other manufacturers, but in a solid front axle you have the carrier, and then you have an inner and outer axle shaft and a U-joint. Well, in an independent front suspension, you still have your carrier, but then you have a stub shaft, and then you have a CV shaft, and the CV shaft has several moving parts to it too before it even gets to the hub and actually is powering a wheel. And you have a CV shaft on both sides. The Nissan independent, or the Nissan front differential, so I'm trying to think in my head how many parts there actually are before you even get to the CV shaft. I think there's 4 or 5 in there, because you've got a stub shaft, and it goes to a flange, and that bolts together, and then you've got seals, and there's a lot going on. And the front differential in like a 2000 to 2004 Xterra or a 98 to 2004 Frontier, they're not very big. And myself, I blew 3 ring and pinion gears just in the front differential, and those aren't cheap parts to replace.
Yeah, for Nissan enthusiasts, no.
Right. So cost plays a big thing into all this also, just for a maintenance standpoint. You were saying that it's a lot of money to put into a vehicle, and it is. It absolutely is. But to maintain it on the back end, once it's complete, it's substantially cheaper, and it's easier, I think, because you have a lot more support from companies like Jeep. The most common front axle that you can use in a Nissan is a Dana 44. That's something that came in Jeeps, it came in Fords, it came in Chevys. You can go to just about any auto parts store, and they will have the parts on the shelf ready to go for those front axles.
Well, some of that, Dana built across the platform, like you were saying, for everybody. Right. Well, now the independent suspension, Dana is still a big company with that, but they build them to that manufacturer's specs now.
Right.
Which is where it's costly.
Yes. So if I were to go into O'Reilly's right now, a local auto parts store, and say I need a CV shaft for a Nissan Xterra, I can almost guarantee you they will have to order one from the warehouse. But if I say I need a inner or outer axle shaft for a Dana 44 from a 79 Ford, I bet they have it on the shelf.
Yeah.
I know for a fact if you go to like Moab, Utah, where it's a mecca for off-roading, they've got them just lining the walls because it's the most common axle that you can buy. And so they'll stock it all day long.
Yeah, so right there, cost is a big deal. There's the initial getting into any hobby. There's always an initial investment you have to do, whether it be just buying a GoPro. If you want to film something, there's an initial investment to do that. Besides the hobby.
Yep.
So when you think about, I'm going to have to dump $3,000, we'll say, into sassing my Frontier Xterra or whatever it is, you're like, man, for a vehicle now that's probably only worth $3,000, that's like, right. That's a big, it was weird. Like I was saying earlier, when the vehicle in 2004, the last year of the Gen 1, you were talking $3,000 to do it. So you were still talking about a $10,000 vehicle. So you're like, okay, that's only a fraction of the value. Now, in some instances, it's more than the value of the vehicle that you're putting under it.
Right. Well, I was talking to a friend last weekend at the car show, and I was talking to people, and they were asking me to put a value on my truck, and it's like, at the end of the day, I could probably rebuild the whole thing, solid axle and everything, for $5,000 to $6,000, because these are old trucks, and they're dirt cheap.
Yeah.
Like, 16-year-old in.
Yeah.
But they don't have a ton of power. They're not a luxury cruiser, so it's it's not a real popular vehicle anymore.
Well, it is for 16-year-olds. Well,
Right.
Mom and Dad can afford to buy that for the first car, which is strange now for our market that me and you love. Is now you're being flooded with all these kids that they want to get into off-roading, and man, I love helping. If you want to get into it and want to actually learn and not just bash your way through things, I am all about helping you. But
absolutely.
Which brings us to this topic. You know, I'm going to just sass, and you're like, to me, in my eyes, before you sass, you need to learn what you have. So you need to spend at least a good year off-roading what you have. And even like you were saying, stock form, these trucks are great. They're going to do most anything you want to do. But learn that, and then from there, manage your expectations of what sassing is going to do. Because I know, mine drives around a little bit, and I'll tinker around the neighborhood with it, but they are a completely different monster now. And I know we both went two different directions with how we did it. I went with the Calamini kit. And initially I was going to do like you did, and I was going to kind of just develop my own idea. And then I got thinking, okay, I know my fabricating skills. I mean, I can get something done when I'm motivated to get it done, which is a big part of my shop is motivation to get it done right. But so I know that kit was engineered, and there was, by now there's at least 100, 150 that I know of, probably SAS Calamini kit Xteros out there. So I was like, okay, it's mostly bolt on. I can weld to the axle. That's not a problem. But what you did because I had started before you did, and of course, like I said, I was flip flopping. I ripped the independent suspension out, and I was flip flopping about safety. So Luke goes, "Oh yeah, I'm sassing," and I was like, "Well, that's cool. When are you gonna do it? Next weekend?" And I'm like, "What?" But what you did was pretty unique. You took a bunch of people's ideas and kind of turned it into your own, right?
Yes. So there's a website, and the guy that runs it, his name is Barry, and it's nissannut.com. It is a fantastic website. It doesn't matter what year Nissan truck you own. He's probably done something to it.
And when you say Nissan Nut, like the dude is, I think it's a hobby for him just to build a vehicle.
Oh, yeah. Well, and so what I've actually done is after I've done my solid axle swap and I've refined it a few times, I have a list now, and I'm more than willing to share it with people on how I did my axle swap and what worked for me. And I put that out, and Barry actually got a hold of me and wanted to know what his site was missing so he could actually go back through and put it out there in another resource to help people as well. Which
is great. Like there's, nobody's pushing this website. Like, I know it's been around for years and years and years, but it's not like, he's not one of these guys that's just out there flooding every forum like, look at my site, look what I've done.
Well, and he's just doing it because he appreciates Nissans and he wants to show people what can be done. He's not selling any products. He's not trying to make any money off of it.
Which is unusual.
What?
Which is unusual now.
Right, it really is.
He doesn't have a t-shirt?
Yeah, he's doing it for the good of the people. And that's kind of what I'm about too. I wanted to promote a resource that is out there just to help. That's kind of, that's what Windrock started as, the National Xterra meet. Our off-road meet is all about the new people. We've seen, I don't know, probably over 100 trucks get built just off of our event alone.
Oh yeah, and if you show up and you bring your wife, man, she's in trouble because you're gonna bring your stock truck and you go, honey, let's open up the wallet, and she's gonna wear you out all the way home.
Well, at the same time though, she might meet some friends and make the start of your Nissan family, because there's plenty of Xterra girls and Nissan girls that come to our events as well.
Yeah, and like your wife, initially when me and you were off-roading together, like Jenna wasn't a part of this, and Kelly, she wanted no part of off-roading when we got together. So,
right, and now it's the complete opposite. But going back to what I did for a solid axle swap is, like I said, the Xterra is best in its stock form. That is where it is the most durable product. So what I did is I kind of took that mentality and applied it to my solid axle swap. So a Jeep Grand Wagoneer built from like 82 to 1991 has a Dana 44 front axle, and it runs leaf springs. I took that axle and I put Jeep Grand Wagoneer leaf springs, but they were the Rancho version, so they were made for a whole 1 inch of lift. I took Jeep Grand Wagoneer steering and I mounted it all to my Nissan Xterra, and it all mounts fairly easily. There's a few different companies. There's Bonnie Motorsports that make a hanger kit. Calmini does also. They don't advertise that it works for an Xterra, but it does. The Bonnie Motorsports, they'll advertise exactly what it fits on.
And he's a homegrown guy who we love promoting.
Yep, absolutely. And so I basically took a different stock truck and applied that suspension geometry and everything to my Xterra, and it worked. I'm not necessarily the first one who did it this way, but I am one of the first ones who used all the Jeep steering, and I did a spring under the axle instead of doing spring over, because keeping my vehicle low was something that was very important to me. On the flip side of that, because I was mimicking a large SUV that was a solid front axle, I retained a lot of daily drivability. And my truck's gone twice now, from Des Moines, Iowa, all the way to Moab, Utah, wheeled trails for 5 days and driven 1,200 miles back home. And not a lot of guys will do that. Even with a brand new Jeep Wrangler, they might not do that because they don't have the comfort that an Xterra can.
So break down this kit a little bit that you've kind of, I won't say that you developed, but what you're using. I mean, obviously you said you use the Jeep steering and stuff, but even with the drive shafts and stuff. So that Dana 44 that we're talking about is a special Dana compared to normal Jeeps because of the diff, the side the diff's on, correct?
Well, it's similar to what's in a new Jeep. The biggest difference about it is it's a Jeep axle, but it's running the 6 5-on-5 bolt pattern. So that's what the Nissan Xterra's 2000 to 2004 run, so it's an easy direct swap. The only difference is it's about an inch shorter, inch and a half shorter than the factory rear axle, but that's something that's easily remedied with some wheel spacers. A lot of Chevy axles and the older Jeep axles had a passenger side differential, and Nissans need a driver side, which the Grand Wagoneer has also. So, and it's also a little bit heavier axle tubing. Depending on how you set up your suspension, though, it might not be relatively low on the Grand Wagoneer, but for me, like I'm saying, I tried to mimic that stock setup, so it worked. It still is working out. But what I did is, like I said, I stayed spring under. In Tennessee, the trails are not made for a truck that's 10 feet tall.
Right.
The lower you are, the better.
So no brodozers here.
Right. And then I took the Jeep Grand Wagoneer steering, and I just took some, I think it was 1 1/4 DOM tubing. So I cut the Jeep Grand Wagoneer tie rod, sleeved it with tubing, and welded it together because it needed to be about 8 to 10 inches longer. But then I bolted it all up and was more or less ready to go down the road.
And you were pretty quickly at Windrock with us.
Yeah, now I can't remember exactly when I did it. I was driving my truck within a weekend.
Yes, which he kept sending me pictures and videos, by the way, and I was like, kiss my ass, Luke, because he was like, what's your problem, man? I've done this in a weekend. What's going on?
We probably should have put this disclaimer at the beginning, but this is by no means something that you're just going to go buy a bunch of parts for and just go do. Right. Even if you do a Calmini kit, there's a lot of things that you need to consider going into it. And I wasn't very vocal about it, but I had been planning my axle swap for I don't know, a good 4 or 5 months before I actually even took any pieces off.
So break that down. Okay, so the first thing is the axle. You need to find you an axle, and I know, like I said before, we're limiting this topic to the Xteras that we know and the Frontiers that we know. So what we're talking about right now may not necessarily work with the Generation 2 Xterra or whatever your Pathfinder you're driving. So break down your thought process of the list when you put it together.
So what I did is, the biggest piece of the puzzle is you got to find the axle. So I found the axle, and that was where I started before I bought anything else. I took the axle completely apart. I figured out what I had, if it was any good, what the gear ratio was. I stripped the axle down. I painted it. I started replacing seals, because for like a Dana 44 front axle, pretty much no matter what it's out of, you can buy a whole rebuild kit for under $200. So that is where I started. I figured out what I had that was good from the axle and what I had that wasn't going to work. And that I got the axle up 100% ready to go before I even moved on to the next step, which is figuring out how you're going to mount this thing under your truck. So I chose the leaf springs, so I bought the leaf springs. And at first I actually bought Chevy leaf springs, and I bought them used because I was trying to do this as cheaply as possible. And that ended up not working for me because my truck would have been about 10 inches taller in the front than I really wanted it to be. So that was my first mistake. But a lot of, when you get into this, your vehicle becomes kind of a Frankenstein. So I was using a Jeep front axle, Jeep leaf springs, Jeep steering. I bought Ford F-350 shock towers because from the factory, those are just stamped or riveted into a Ford frame. So you can actually buy a replacement. Again, a budget, cheap item. I think I paid like $40 for a set. Once I got the axle on the leaf springs under there, I figured out where the shocks needed to go and welded the towers to the frame. For a little bit better braking, I used a Dodge Ram master cylinder. For the drive shaft, I actually found that a Dodge Ram front drive shaft has the actual same splines. So the factory Xterra drive shaft has a slip in it, which from the factory it can't actually slip in and out. So most people will take their front drive shaft out and it'll be seized, so they won't even think that it slips, but it really should. But the Dodge Ram has the same spline because it's a Spicer-made drive shaft. So I was able to take a Dodge Ram drive shaft, shorten it, weld it back together, and with the Rugged Rocks adapter, I was able to bolt that right up to my Nissan and made that work. Really the biggest piece of the puzzle I had to get made was a transmission crossmember. And even that was just a piece of 2-inch square tubing that we cut and bent and welded back together and mounted on the transmission just so the front drive shaft has clearance.
So all in all, you said you took you were looking at this for a few months before you started piecing this together, and I know as far as like the Dodge drive shaft and stuff, like that was pretty much your idea, right? Like you were just looking for parts that because there is no such thing as a budget with these trucks with doing this. I mean, you can,
right.
It's not like, I know a lot of guys are just used to going to NizTech and buying for their Gen 2, they want to buy a kit. And a $1,500 will get you a 3-inch lift kit and, you're all day long happy. But for this, it's not that simple.
No. And it really isn't. It can look like it's simple and it can look like it's cheap because like a Bonnie Motorsports kit, I want to say is like $250. And that is literally all you need to hang leaf springs off the front of your Nissan. So then you're thinking, oh, that's cheap. Well, leaf springs new, if you bought new Ranchos, that's $300. Then you got to figure out if you're spring over, spring under, set your axle up correctly for it. It gets into a whole, it starts to snowball. But I can take full credit for my Dodge Ram drive shaft because that was a lot of junkyard research. When you go to Rugged Rocks, they sell, it's just called a TX10 adapter, and he just states on the website that it has a 1310 and a 1330 bolt pattern. At first, I wasn't even really sure what exactly that meant. So I had to do some research on numerous sites to figure that out. Well, 1310, 1330, those are U-joint sizes. So the bolt pattern with the U-joint isn't necessarily a direct correlation because it kind of changes with manufacturers and who they use to build the drive shafts, which most of the time is Spicer. But after figuring out what the bolt pattern was of the Rugged Rocks adapter, I was able to go to a junkyard, and whatever truck had a solid front axle or a drive shaft that had the double cardone joint, so that what that means is the drive shaft has 3 U-joints so it can run at higher angles. I started pulling them out, and I was measuring the flanges for the bolt patterns and just kind of checking out the drive shafts to see what measured up and what looked like it was close to fitting. And a 94 to 2001 Dodge Ram, the front, and a 1500 at that, the front drive shaft is a fantastic candidate. The drive shafts can usually be had for around $60. You can Google how to shorten a drive shaft and find all sorts of videos, and it's, if you've got a welder and a sawzall or a grinder, it's really not that bad of a project.
Right. So you were saying with the way you did it, so you had to figure out way to brace your transmission, you had to figure out this drive shaft situation, and then you had to figure out how the proper angles for your axle. That's the biggest hurdles right there, right?
Yes. And when I hear of somebody talking about drivability issues, and this is something that I'm probably not the best at addressing, because when you start talking about caster and camber and pinion angle, those are hard things to fully explain over the internet through Facebook. And that is where I've had a lot more success, because I took an axle from a stock Jeep and I mimicked the suspension. So my front axle sits very, very similar to how it's going to sit in a Jeep Grand Wagoneer. Versus maybe you bought an axle that somebody else had in a different Nissan or a different Jeep. Well, they might have cut and turned the axle so that the pinion's at a different angle to fit their specific application. When you do that, it makes the steering angles kind of funny, and it can make it not a very pleasant ride when you're trying to take off and go down the road. Right. Which is, I can drive my Xterra at 80 miles an hour through Utah, which is the speed limit there, so I'm legal, and I can do it with confidence. Versus, I've heard horror stories where similar built trucks have gone 60 and gotten in danger, and they were very uncomfortable at those speeds.
Well, and some of that is the difference between the how mine is done and how yours is done. So with mine, I decided I was going the route of easier, basically, because I decided I wanted my family to ride in this. I wanted safety, and I wanted a kit that worked out. It'd been worked out. The bugs worked out. But with mine, you had to go coil over. So coilover is a whole different animal. It's somewhere in between the IFS, the current IFS, and the how Luke did his with the springs. Like there's some weird. It's in between of there. But what you get with the coilover, and something that I didn't care about, you get a lot of flex. So anytime you see these guys in these pictures of they're really at like Golden Crack or whatever out in Moab, like you see these crazy flex pictures of these Jeeps, just stretching out. It's sort of how they've done it. They have a big spring out there that lets it stretch out. Well, mine has a spring, or it actually has two springs, but in the middle it has your shock, so it's all one unit. But there's a stability issue with what I have versus what Luke has, and so when you were talking about some guys at 60 miles an hour, it gets a little iffy. If you do not have the coilover set up just right, it's one of those iffy deals.
Yep. And then when you go to the coilovers too, you have a lot more. So what Dave's running is called a radius arm. So it's kind of a 4-link in the sense that there's 4 links that are actually holding the axle to the frame of the truck, and then he has this coilover. So you have a substantial amount of points, more points that have adjustability than I do. I've got the leaf spring, which attaches to the front, and then attaches to a shackle in the back, and then attaches to the axle. Once you get those set, you're done. You're not really going back and tweaking it. Versus Dave's, you can sit there and you can adjust the radius arm mounts top and bottom. You can adjust the coilovers. You can adjust all sorts of stuff.
And if you know what you're doing, it's awesome. But the downside to this kit is, sure, it's all bolt on, but there's no real instructions of going, here's the best setup for your deal. And
you're gonna have a hard time unless you have a very good off-road shop that's into custom builds. You're gonna have a hard time getting people to cooperate with you a lot of the time as well, because when you call them and tell them that you've got a Nissan Xterra with a solid front axle, they're like, okay, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
So you have to really know who you're going to for them, and be able to trust them to help get a truck like that truly dialed in.
Right, but as far as the setup, I use the same axle that you did.
Yeah.
Even like the drive shaft and stuff that you were talking about, it works perfectly with what I'm trying to do, because that's the downside of the Calamini kit is you go, okay, it's $1,800 now or whatever the kit is. You go, okay, that's not a lot. But then what they don't tell you is, oh, that doesn't include the drive shaft. That doesn't include the sway bar. And it's by the time Calamini would get done with you, you're looking at $3,000 with just Calamini, if not more.
Well, and that it doesn't include the coilovers.
Right.
So you're $4,000 to $5,000 into that kit if you get it. And then when you get it, just to get down the road.
And that's not having it, getting it dialed in and everything. So if I were to do it again, I would just go the leaf spring approach like you did, because I think ultimately you're probably at least $1,500 cheaper than the way I went.
Yeah, if I were to follow my list to the T, you could a lot of the variable of cost comes down to axle, because you might be able to find an axle out of a junkyard that has good brakes. You don't need to put new calipers on it. The hubs have been switched out for Warns. So it's hard to really say, but if I picked up a $200 axle and I pretty much replaced everything on it, I had to put new ball joints in, new bearings, new seals, new new discs, new calipers. So I probably have, I don't know, $700 to $900 just in getting my axle up to tip-top shape. But if you were able to find one in decent shape for around $300, you could probably do a leaf spring swap for $2,200 to $2,500.
Right. So if you were that kid that just bought your Xterra or your Frontier or whatever platform you're on, and you're thinking, oh man, that's it, I can go to, if I had a Gen 2, I could buy that that Niztec kit for $1,500. That's not much difference. But then you get into welding things, and there's, even with the Calamini kit, sure, it's 85% bolt on, but there are things that you need to have some welding skills at.
Yep. And that's the hardest thing, is you're talking to people about it, and I might make it sound too easy, but I'm by no means a professional welder, but I'm very comfortable when it comes to welding something for my own use. I don't commercially sell any products that I fabricate. I've sold a few bumpers, but it's to friends. I've never had a weld break on me, but when it comes to my truck, if I have to cut into the frame and re-weld something together or re-weld a suspension component, I'm completely comfortable doing that, and I'll do it in my garage at my house. I don't have to call anybody. I don't have to ask for any help. So if you're not comfortable fabricating, then this is probably not something for you, because there's not really any shops. There's a few shops out there that can help with this, but
if they want to.
Right. I know of one that set up a friend's build, and I'm pretty sure he's torn just about everything off of it because they didn't really set it up correctly. So he didn't have any flex. His drive shaft was binding. He did a bunch of money on it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's, of course, we love Nissans, and that's sort of one of the downfalls to the Nissan brand versus the Jeep brand and stuff is, shops, off-road shops, they love Jeep. I mean, that's their bread and butter. They know them in and out. You can buy parts. And then you take one of these, like you were saying earlier, you take one of these vehicles and they just kind of scratch their head like, well, this isn't supposed to be on these vehicles to begin with. And then, you say you are that guy that takes your vehicle to somebody and says, yeah, I'll assess that thing for you. And still, even though you know what the components do, they don't understand the vehicle.
Right. And to me, there's a big downfall of having a shop do this, because if you're going to do this modification to your truck and you're going to take it off-road, you need to understand what you have, because more than likely, nobody else has anything on the trail that's set up the same way. They don't know exactly what you bought and what you put on it. So when something breaks, you need to understand what you have and how it works so you can fix it and get off the trail. Mm-hmm. I don't know, gone through 6 or 7 axle shafts. I know exactly what I have. I put it together so I can take it apart and I can carry a couple spare parts, and I can get myself off the trail and not need the help of anybody else. Because say there's a group of Jeep guys that you go with, around me, that's all I've got. If I break, they're going to all look at my truck and go, I don't have a clue what's going on, so they're not going to be able to help me.
Right.
So you need to be able to understand what you have in order to help yourself in the future.
Yeah, definitely. If you're thinking about going down this road, yeah, you want to turn almost every bolt if you can, definitely.
Yep.
And then even I'm horrible with like I'm that guy that wants his toy done, and I mean I want to do it myself, but like I still need to go through my front axle. You were smart enough to rebuild it right away. I was my budget at the time was bargain basement. Like I was looking for every cheap part I could find, and let me tell you, that's awesome when you find these. Like my axle was my big expense. It cost me $700, I think. But what I got with that axle was an aux locker built in, and it already had the 513 gearing that I needed in it. So it sounded expensive, but in the end, that was the actual bargain. But everything else I thought I'm going to go cheap on, bit me in the ass. So
yep.
So sure, even the Cal Mini kit I bought. I bought it. It was new old stock with somebody. They used it to make some parts. They were wanting to, I think, clone some parts off of it. I don't know what they were doing with it. But by the time I got it, half the bolts were missing out of the box because it had been shipped probably 3 times. Who knows how many times to them, and then they ship it to me. Time I get it, UPS or FedEx, whoever it was, they put 15 holes in the sides of the boxes. And then, so even like learning the bolts for me has been an adventure. Now I know what bolts are under this truck, even with the kit, you just get these, whatever they send you. But so like with you going through your axle, I've yet to do that with mine because I needed my vehicle. Honestly, I moved from a house and my truck was still, didn't have an axle under it, and it was time to move. And I'm looking in my old garage going, well, there's an Xterra out there. I need to get out. So literally like, mine's in my driveway now, and I look at that axle. I haven't even painted the axle, man. So I like it's. I'm gonna have to get a wheel to it and clean it up. But like Luke was saying, is know everything under your vehicle. Like even pulling the shafts out and just before you bolt it up, if you want to learn how that axle works, pull those shafts out, look at it. Maybe whoever you bought the axle from already did custom work, and which is another thing. You just assume you're buying sort of a factory axle. You better even know where that came from.
Yep. Well, you might, who knows, you might pull the axle shafts out and find out that they're chromoly. You might pull it out and find out there's a lunchbox locker in the front. One of the truly best things, I was saying how you can go to about any auto parts store and buy parts for these. On the other side of that, there's tons of people that have done write-ups on how to tear these apart and how to work on them. I had set the gears in my independent suspension, which was vastly different. It was similar but different than doing a solid front axle. I found probably 10 excellent videos on YouTube on how to set gears. So I bought the gears, I bought the kit, I followed their instructions, and I didn't have any issues with my front axle. So there's so much on the backside of this on support of your vehicle. You just have to be willing to learn and retain the information, and it can be something that lasts you a real long time.
Well, you know, I will call us the second generation of doing this, really, because, there was 5 or 6 years before me and you got into these. We are very lucky that YouTube seemed to pop up right when we were really getting into this, because the early pioneers of this stuff, man, it was, who do you call when that Calamini kit you bought or whatever, something, even though they build them to standards, sometimes things don't, these trucks get wheeled before, the frames move around a little bit. Who would you talk to other than on a forum,
Right. Well, and, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I used to base my information off of was off of, like, old Bronin wheelers, which half of the people that listen to this probably have no idea who those guys even are, and they pioneered a lot of this stuff. It's like Alpine Spirit and Grandpa X, and I cannot think of Josh's screen name on the forums at all. But all those guys who have done 2, 3, 4 different trucks, it was hard. They're more than willing to share the information, and they did, but it was on old forums, and they didn't have Facebook to post to. They didn't make YouTube videos. They know all this stuff, but you have to dig. This isn't something that I would do based off of a Facebook group. What? Because there's no background to it. The information is out there, and you can find it and be able to support yourself in doing this. You just have to be willing.
Well, so how many iterations has your truck been through now? Because I know you've been on this for about 5 years now.
I think it's only 3. Maybe it's 4. Maybe it is 4 years. So I originally did it, and I didn't put a locker in at first because that was extra money, and I used the Ford shock towers. I came down to Windrock, and you and me and a few other people, we just kind of went wheeling for a long weekend.
Which let me interrupt you. Let me tell you, like, me and Luke's personalities are like, Luke's one side of the spectrum and I'm the other. So, like, Luke going, hey, I just did this. I'm driving this vehicle down, and we're gonna go wheel it. I'm like, what? And then, like, you gave zero F's about, like, I mean, you pushed that vehicle, and I'm like, he does know he has to drive back, right?
Well, and that was my break-in run. I drove 12 hours through actually I think it was like 14 hours through the night, through thunderstorms and bad weather. I mean, trees were blowing over on the interstate, but Windrock is my end-all, be-all favorite place to go four-wheeling. I love Moab. It's beautiful, but there's just something about the trails in Tennessee that I'll never stop going back to. So when it came time to truly test out my swap, it was, well, we're going to drive 12 hours, 1,000 miles to Tennessee, and we're going to see what this thing can do. And I think I got there at about 5 in the morning. I slept until about 6 in the morning, And then me and Nestor went four-wheeling. The first thing I did was about drove off the side of the mountain because it had been raining so hard. I guess that was the night that we got stuck out there and kept winching too, wasn't it?
I came in that next morning, so.
So that's to me what it's all about, though. If you're gonna build these things, you need to use them. Lost a little bit of road drivability to a degree, but I still drive it everywhere. You gotta push it. So that's why I went down there. And I'm not saying I came home and it was all perfect. I had a whole bunch of loose bolts and things that needed fixed.
Well,
but
you were lucky too that your buddy came with you, because if you would have had to done that trip by yourself, you would have heard every squeak. It would have been 100 times worse.
Yeah, paranoia would have set in.
Yeah.
Well, and it was probably 6 to 8 months of me driving it where I wasn't 100% confident with it. I'd never done it before. I'd never set the gears. I'd never had a solid front axle truck. So there was a large learning curve, and it took me a very long time to get fully comfortable with driving my own truck again. But I had my original setup. I drove it down to Tennessee. I came back, and I think I had the stock Xterra front drive shaft, which I got to work. I actually had to shorten it a little bit. That cracked after that trip. My shock towers weren't the best. There was some movement going on with them. They'd kind of twist when the truck flexed. So I got back, I changed those two things. Maybe after Wint that same year, so I don't know, 5-6 months later, I ended up getting a Laka up front. So that involved going through the axle again and resetting gears. The whole front end has probably been revamped 3 times now, just so it's as strong as it can be. At first, I tried using stock Dana 44 axle shafts. Now they're full chromoly. It has an air locker up front instead of a mechanical. The mechanical just seemed to put too much stress on the steering with it being locked all the time. I got some hoops bent for the shock towers, and my fender wells are all cut out, and the shock towers go all the way up almost to the hood, so I have as much travel as I can. I don't know. It's hard for me to even think, but it's been revamped several times.
Okay, so since you said you've revamped it a few times, if you were to do it now, what were the mistakes that you would sort of dodge? Because I know you wanted to get this in and out of your shop pretty quick. Would you take more time with things, or what was the big thing that you sort of, not regret, but I wished I'd have done this, just a little bit different?
Did I lose you? Oh, are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
Oh, it looks like you were frozen. The biggest thing was I wish I never would have done the mechanical front locker, and I should have gone to a 1-ton steering kit right away. Some people use Heim joints. There's nothing wrong with Heim joints, but they don't hold any sort of lubrication. You can't hold grease.
Are you bashing my truck? Are you bashing my truck now?
No, but for me in the Midwest, in the Rust Belt, Heim joints just don't get along with the winter.
Right.
The mechanical locker just seemed to put way too much stress on my steering. I'd overheated it a couple times, and it just was because both wheels were always trying to turn. So when I'm trying to climb and turn, it made things very difficult for myself and for my little truck. But really, besides that locker, and the factory Jeep steering worked great when I was on 33s. Going to 35s, it was just a bit much for it. I went and did Pritchett Canyon, which is a very difficult trail in Moab. Felt pretty good about my truck and myself after getting off the trail, get on the road, hit 40, and experience death wobble for the first time, and the steering had to be torn off about 12 hours before I was about ready to head back home to Iowa and had to completely replace everything.
Was that with the 33s or was that with the 35s?
That was 35s.
So that's
so
once you
35s are totally what killed the steering. If you're gonna stay on 33s, which some days I wish I kind of would have. 35s make everything substantially easier, as far as rolling over things, but I just broke less parts on 33s.
Well, and that's something else we need to look at when talking about this. My goal was just to stay 33s. I know your goal, you just wanted to stay on 33s, and then you not ego or anything, but you get these vehicles built up, and like, dude, you were following people around in Moab with your 33s these are some guys on 37s, man, and you're just following along, But if you really, like, the Calamini kit that I used was not intended for 35s. I mean, I'm going to throw that out there real quick. Everybody kind of bitches and fusses at Calamini, who when you get it, they make an excellent part. They put a lot of time and engineering into their parts, but they were breaking at the links a little bit because those tires, just kind of what you had with your steering, the bigger the tire, the more problems that brings to the steering. But if you're going to sass it, you think about the tires that you're going to run. Think about before you finish that last bolt. If you have 33s on, you're like, oh, I'm going up to 37s, man. You better really think about your setup and will it handle that?
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because when I set mine up, it was more or less perfected. I'm using air quotes on perfected around 33s, because when I was fully stuffed and flexed out, I cleared 33s fine. I put 513 gears in, and I could drive up the mountain passes going through Denver and maintain the speed limit, which might sound silly, but these are heavy trucks with little horsepower, so that was like a feat for me. That was like running up all the stairs and doing my Rocky movement,
right?
Because my truck with the gearing in the 33s drove so well. And at the end of the day, I don't even really know why I went to 35s. I'm not going back to 33s.
That was real quick.
Of a deal on 35s, but when I built the truck, the axle sits about an inch forward from stock, so that's why it cleared 33s. Now I've had to cut my fenders and cut into the body to make clearance, and it still hits. So if I were to do it again, doing your tire, really coming to an agreement with yourself and your budget, you really need to know your tire size and what you're trying to accomplish from the start. Because that does change a lot of things. If I were to redo it, my axle would be about 2 inches further forward. So I'd have that clearance and a little bit longer wheelbase to support a larger tire. And I might even have gone up a gear ratio as well.
Well, for the 45 miles an hour, I've taken mine. I'm happy with my 513s.
Well, in 513s, so Xters are kind of goofy because you either got them with a 4.6 or a 4.9, unless it was a two-wheel drive, but that's not pertinent right now. So it's kind of a crapshoot when you're doing ratios and trying to calculate for what matches stock, but if you had 4.9s and then moved to 35, I think it comes out to like a 522 gear ratio, puts you back at stock. So a 513 doesn't fall that much lower under that. I mean, my speedometer is fairly close. I think it's like saying I'm going 4 miles an hour slower than I really am. But I'm comfortable with it up to 70, 75 miles an hour. It doesn't seem to struggle much on hills or anything. It's a good gear ratio. And I actually had this conversation about 2 days ago. People saying 4.9 to 513 isn't that much different. Well, it is. It's a lot different. The numbers aren't that far apart, sure. But it all has to do with how your transmission and transfer case handle everything. You and me have seen Ed and Casey with their big blue Xterra on 35s and 49s. It has crawler gears that have to make up for it. Versus I've done tons of the same trails as them, and I don't have crawler gears, and we're neck and neck for the most part. Right. He has a little more low-end grunt and can make it up stuff, but half the time on the trail, he's shifting into 4 high just to maintain some speed, which, I mean, I'd love to put crawler gears in at some point, but I really haven't felt the need or necessity to have to do that.
Well, and when we were talking about budgeting these SASs, that's something, gearing is something you have to look at too, that, like you were saying, most of these trucks come with a 4.6 or 4.9. Unless you find that Dana with a 4.9 in it, you're gonna have to swap gearing out.
Yep, and this is just all falls back to research too. So most of the Jeep Grand Wagoneer axles had a small carrier. So there's 2 different carrier sizes, and it's like 372 and up, and then 3 something and down. So there's a small carrier and a large carrier that come in these axles. If you run the small carrier, you can actually run thicker gears that come in a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon, which is what I'm running. So it's a thicker gear, it's got a little bit more strength, but the biggest thing is because it's thicker, it has a higher cooling capacity because there's more surface touching oil. So I didn't know that at first when I got it. I thought I was going to have to buy a locker or something to get the proper gearing and step up a carrier size, but you look around long enough and you can figure out that these axles are so configurable in so many different ways, it's kind of unreal. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, those Rubicon gears cost me $150. And now I actually was lucky enough to be the first one to run them, but Revolution, they make gears for the factory Nissan H233B, and they're like $265, which still really isn't that bad for a ring and pinion.
Which is, compared to years ago, I remember what they were $550, something like that for a gear set.
Yeah, you could get 514s that were Nissan specific part, and they were like $450. Nitro came out with some that were $320, and then Revolution came out with these, and I think it's $265 on Rugged Rocks. But so it's really not that bad. You're under $400 for front and rear gears, and it's something you can totally do yourself. Right. It's something you need to double check about 7 times before you put it together, but
or if you have a Nissan Master Tech that happens to be in your area, you can have that.
Right.
Have him help you out too. Well, so that seems, I mean, that's a pretty good idea on the Gen 1, I think, and this, this goes through the hard body a little bit because it's basically the same platform. But let's get to Gen 2 just a little bit, and this is something I know me and you don't know a ton about, but let's talk about it just a little bit. So Gen 2, okay, so the Gen 1 Xterra and basically Nissans all before 2005, they all had manual transfer cases, which was my favorite thing.
Yep.
It's less soccer mommy. It was just basically a truck. And I know Danny will argue with me all day long about how the Gen 2 is still a truck, but it's not that old school technology. It's a new school technology.
Yep, they added a lot of creature comforts.
Right, and with those creature comforts comes a computer system, and instead of you having to shift into 4 high or 4 low, you have this little button that you turn, and it does it all for you now.
Yep.
Which creates problems for the newer vehicles that are wanting to do this, right?
Yes. So the 4-wheel drive system now heavily relies on the ABS and the braking system. So it's possible to solid axle swap a 2005 and newer. There's a handful of them out there. If you're going to use a 4-wheel drive truck to start, though, you have to have the knowledge and know-how to be able to match the ABS signal from the axles to the transfer case to be able to get your transfer case to work. I've been told several different things, but at the end of the day, I think what it is the ABS tone rings from the front axle and the rear axle have to send the same frequency of signal up to the transfer case in order for it to all work together.
Right.
The two biggest ones that are the most public about it, being Chema out in California and Angel with Offroad Gorilla, they both have solid axle trucks. They both run an Atlas transfer case, though, so they're kind of bypassing all that stuff altogether.
Mm-hmm.
I was told Atlas didn't make a conversion kit anymore, but then it sounds like Boondock's got a hold of one, so I don't know if maybe they're producing them again or not, but that turns it from your soccer mom vehicle with the push button back to having a stick, and you're actually physically shifting it into four-wheel drive.
Right. So when you're, as far as I know right now, nobody's done leaf springs on a Gen 2 Frontier or Xterra, right?
Right.
Which is, and some of that I think is because the frame narrows, right?
Right. There actually is a guy in Brazil running a D40 Frontier with leaf springs. It is massive. He's running like 40-inch Super Swampers on it. It's a really, really tall truck. If you've ever... Maybe it's not even Brazil. It might be Costa Rica. I'll find him and I'll send it to you so you can post it up on your Facebook social media pages. But I don't know any specs about it. But the older Xterras and Frontiers, the frame kind of is a U shape up front. It goes up and then kind of dips back down for the front bumper. So it makes it very easy to adapt a spring hanger and shackles to mount your leaf springs. On the newer models, right behind the front wheels, the frame slopes up and then it kind of just stays flat. So you would have to build a really big hanger or add really big shims or just build your axle a certain way for it to all work. But at the end of the day, it's still very hard to get the axle to have much up travel before it hits the frame.
Right. Which I know for like the 4Runner guys too, that's part of their problem is why you don't see a ton of them is because the way the framing does, they just can't. You can get all the droop you want, but yeah, it can't come back up.
Yep. Yeah, there's nowhere for the axle to go up.
Right. So other than I know there's a handful of the guys that did it, to me, like the perfect, if I was going to take that generation of a vehicle, I think I'd find that V8 Pathfinder, and it gives you something fresh front and rear, you know?
Right.
Like, and it's also, you know, it's set up for coil in the rear, so which would be nice. Or spring in the rear. There's not, I mean, like with that truck, there's just not a lot of simple answers to it because, for one, the people that have done it haven't really put every nut and bolt out there that they've done. I know with Angels, he bought it from somebody that had already sassed it, and then he went through it and like Frankenstein the thing, and it's like a beast of a beast now.
Yeah, and I think now it's on 1 tons and he's on 40s. The most simple answer is, of course, a very expensive answer, but there have been at least 3 2005 plus Xterras that have been solid axle swapped by taking the newer Dana 44 axles out of a Jeep Rubicon. And that's what Angels started as, and that's what David Parrish runs, and the other guy I want to say is out in Washington or Oregon. But the Dana 44s from a newer Jeep Wrangler, they've got ABS systems and everything on it, so you can adapt all that wiring to work with the stock Nissan transfer case and get that all to work. You're making custom mounts for the suspension front and rear. You're making custom drive lines. You've got a whole bunch of hurdles to cross to get it to all work, but as far as the four-wheel drive aspect, it seems like that has been the most solid answer.
Right, and I think price-wise too, you're going from $3,000 to $4,000, probably to about $10,000 to do it.
Oh, easily. I haven't seen those axles very cheap ever, and like the ones that were on Angel's truck, they were trussed front and rear because they're not quite as strong as like the axle you and I are running.
Right.
So you end up with a substantial amount of work. At the end of the day, it's really kind of the same as swapping a Gen 1. You're taking a $3,000 truck and putting $3,000 into the suspension. Well, a Gen 2, it might be a $8,000 or $9,000 truck, and you're doubling that and putting it into suspension. So it's how much money do you have to spend on your toy to go beat on it?
Well, could you imagine if a Calamini or somebody really sat down? I know there's a way to develop a kit. And,
right.
And I know Nestor has been working on this problem for quite a while. Could you imagine how many, if it was as easy to bolt on as the Calamini kit is, could you imagine how many they would sell? Like the first year, you'd probably sell 50 kits.
Oh, I think you really would, especially if you could make it comparable to a Titan Swap kit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a Titan Swap it's really your closest answer to a solid axle rig. And that's at Windrock, when I lead the difficult group, we probably have a pretty fair mix of solid axle trucks and then Titan Swap that are in my group. And they both have their weaknesses, but at the end of the day, we all have just as much fun as each other going down the same damn trail.
Right. And I would say for the Gen 2, man, really, unless you're just that, you better have a shop that you can just dedicate months and months to the vehicle like Boondocks and them. Because that's not something, you're not just bolting on things, you're figuring out problems. You're probably, I would say, give yourself a year of that truck sitting there and you working out every problem and kink to get it going.
Yeah. It definitely is going to be around a year, especially if you have a full-time job and you're trying to fund your project. It'd be one thing if you could just sit in a shop and work on it all day, but even Angel had a shop put his together and it took a few months. Same with Chema. Mm-hmm. It wasn't an overnight project. It was...
Well, and with Chema, they're using the Rugged Rocks diamond housing. What, is it the HB 233 or whatever?
Yeah, H233B. So he has a first-gen front axle.
Yeah, they're flipping the rear axle into a front axle, right?
Yeah. Which that's what you're doing there is you're kind of mimicking a Patrol a little bit because they had that overseas. Unless you're Oz 4-wheel drive and you're driving around over here with two of them.
Yeah, jerk. But yeah, I mean, so looking, if I was a Gen 2 guy, I'm probably going Titan Swap. I mean, even at that's an expensive swap. It's not that cheap to do. And and like you're saying, you're getting a lot of the benefits. You know, like there is weakness to each design, but you at least there's enough of those out there now. If I was doing Gen 2 stuff, that at least people know it works.
Right, and you're gonna have a lot more. You're gonna have way more resources to help support that. And I've seen people run 37s on a Titan Swap. They usually end up back at 35s because it's very stressful on it.
Yeah, I know Bill Irish had problems with his a little bit. I think he said he wouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
On Xterra, anyways.
Yep. And I don't know for sure, but I think his problems were just the short wheelbase on such a tall tire.
Yeah.
It was a really wicked truck to look at because I saw it right after it was built.
Yeah, well, we went over to his condo after he hurt himself, and I'm like kind of IFing that truck, like, oh my god, that's just because he bedlined, it was Raptor lined or whatever. I mean, it was just beautiful looking truck.
Oh yeah. No, it was very well done.
What I heard,
that's supercharged and
what I heard on that one is it went back to 35s too, real quick.
Yep. But at the end of the day, I mean, that kind of truck on 35s, especially if you're locking the front and rear, you're going a lot of places. You've got the horsepower. You've got, especially if you re-gear on the 35s. I mean, those you're not losing with that setup. That's for sure.
Right. Well, with hard body, and I know this is something we don't know a ton about either, but with hard body, it pretty much seems like leaf spring's the way to go on that. Do you know anything about that?
Well, and there's actually, I don't remember his name. There's one guy that's running a kit very similar to Chema on a regular cab short bed hard body.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing with leaf springs on the hard body is Cal Mini advertises the leaf spring hanger kit for the hard body. So those shackles, the bell shackles that they offer, are actually what I've got on my Xterra, because like I said, the frame is similar. But I think those are even older trucks. You can buy them pretty dang cheap. So at the end of the day, that's still just a cheap route to be able to throw a solid front axle under your teeny tiny little pickup.
Right. Your truck with 130 horse or whatever.
Right. Well, yeah, most of them, well, even if it was a V6, I think those only had 160 horsepower.
Well, you know, this is a little tangent, but I remember we were going to buy a rodeo. And, of course, the Isuzu rodeo came in a 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder. And this is, this would probably been about a 92 rodeo. And I remember back in the day, and it was the same with Nissan. Like, their V6s and 4-cylinders, there was no power difference between either vehicle. Like, it was so minuscule.
Oh, yeah. Well, I want to say that the 4-cylinder had like 140 or 150 horsepower.
Yeah. My sister's hardbody had plenty of power as a 4-cylinder, man.
Well, because I had a 97 4-cylinder hardbody, and I pulled my grandma's 20-foot pontoon boat with it. It was amazing. It was like you had this powerful pickup truck, but it had a little 4-cylinder car motor in it.
Right. And you got 25 miles a gallon.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, you really did.
But so, and I know like our hard body guys, they're getting fewer and fewer of those floating around, but I wanted to touch on it a little bit. I've seen a ton of those, but it seems to be all custom builds. I know, like you said, Calamini makes something, but
yep,
getting the parts or whatever the deal is with that, you don't see a ton of them around, but it seems a lot of custom stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think that kind of turns into redneck engineering. Hey, I've got this little pickup. It still runs like a champ, so let's throw some big tires under it and go.
Right. So if you were to choose now, knowing what you know about yours, and you've seen like our buddy Brady and everything, what platform, if you were going to start over, what platform, and knowing you were going to SAS, what would you do?
If you would have asked me this a year ago, I would have said that I would build a little Nissan, a hard body. I'd build a regular cab short bed, and it would have the 4-cylinder, but I'd throw a little turbo on it. I think I'd get a crap load of looks. And it would be built very similar to my Xterra, except it'd be on 35s, and then probably some funky kind of cage in the bed, kind of like Brady's. Mm-hmm. We all love Brady's Frontier. It's completely badass. He walks up that rock challenge every year, and it's, at the end of the day, it's kind of a very modest build. It's not super tall. It's on 37s, but it just frickin' works all day long. But now that I have a kid, totally changes your mindset. There's no way in the next, 20 years that I'll be able to get away with a regular cab short bed pickup. I've had my Xterra for 10 years, and I've never had the urge to get rid of it. So I think that tells me if I were to do it again, I would do the same damn thing. Mm-hmm. I might change up the front a little bit. I don't have any complaints of the leaf springs up front, but I might do like a coil and shock suspension. There's a couple guys running those. You can run a lot of stuff that's off of, on Xterra Nation, there's a guy in Canada that did a Bronco type suspension up front. Just kind of something different and cool. Ultimately, though, I would figure out a really good answer for the rear suspension, because that's where mine lacks the most right now.
Well, I know you've went through of course, I have your old leaf spring sitting outside here that I need to get on. But I know you've kind of played around with the rears just a little bit, and we haven't even really touched. Here we're an hour and a half in or whatever. We really haven't even touched like the rear suspension of these things, because that is something you have to look at. And you're now leaf over, or well, no, Xterra is that, or no, Xterra's under, right? I can't remember.
Yep. So from the factory, it's spring under, front and rear.
Yeah.
From the factory, it's spring under in the rear. And that's the way I drove around for, I don't know, the first 3 years. And I really didn't have any issues with it until I was in Utah, and I started looking at my truck, and the shackles in the back were both angling towards the passenger side. And so I thought I bent my shackles. And I got home and tore them all apart, and they were straight. There was nothing wrong with them. They were fine. Well, what happened is the Xterra has really goofy front hangers for the leaf springs. They're different on both sides of the truck. Mine were smashed. They were completely beaten in. They were pulling the leaf springs in different angles. So even when I drove home, it just didn't drive right. To be honest, the frame is probably not very straight underneath the truck anymore. That year I bent a slider. I abused it. So now I have Chevy Suburban, 2500 Suburban leaf springs under the rear, because I carry a lot of tools. I'm one of those people that has my truck ready to go pretty much 24/7. So if I want to go four-wheeling, I can jump in it and go four-wheeling. I don't have to pack it up. So I carry probably too much with me, so I needed some extra capacity. So I put these 60-inch leaf springs under the rear. It holds the truck at the right height. It doesn't sit incredibly tall, but because they're a stiffer, thicker leaf spring, I don't have a ton of flex. And now it isn't the most enjoyable to drive 75 miles an hour down the highway. So
little forgiving.
It really just is going to take time to iron that out. But
right. So it's not as forgiving, I'm assuming, with bumps and.
No, the leaf springs that I sold you, those were fantastic. They're just a slightly heavier duty leaf spring over factory, and I think I have 3 Add-A-Leafs shoved in there, but those things rode fantastic.
And he's threatened he wants them back, but we've never came to terms with this just yet.
Well, I want them back until I sit there and remember that I've cut all the stock mounts off of my axles, my frame, so it's not really something I can just swap in.
Would you, if you were going to do it now with those hangers the way they are, because they are kind of a goofy hanger, would you put some plate over those a little bit, as kind of armor those up a little bit?
Yeah, and I've talked to Joaquin with the Cream Puff several times, and I've told him there really isn't a problem. Factory Xterras flex very well, especially if you can add some longer shocks in there. The rear end of those trucks is designed great. You could probably cut down the stock mount a little bit, and then I'd just reinforce it with some plating, and you'd be good to go. Yeah, because you could get Alcan leaf springs to match your height, and you're ready to rock.
Yeah, because they even from where they bolt, there's this sort of gap of plate that just sort of hangs down. It's very strange. It's very truck-like, Danny, that they just took a truck frame and said, "Hey, let's just make this work."
Yeah. I don't know. That's the only problem is the front mounts. There's nothing wrong with the way the rear hangers are for the leaf springs. It's just the front they're just goofy.
Yeah, I've been thinking about just getting some 3/16 plate and just sort of going over with what they've got, because even what they put on there is not real thick, So just kind of like what the Niztec shock skids or whatever they call them is, sort of that idea.
Right. No, I think that'd be a good idea. I just wish I would have done it
before yours is all garbaged up.
Yeah.
So did you end up just cutting yours off, or what did you do?
Yeah, there's like Rough Stuff and Barnes 4-wheel drive sell Chevy 63-inch spring hanger kits.
Mm-hmm.
So I cut all my mounts off, and I bought one of those kits and did some measurements and welded it all on. The rear axle gets shoved back a little bit when you do spring over, and then you've got to get the rear drive shaft lengthened. And I know I've told people this before, when you go spring over, everybody thinks you get all this lift. Well, a lot of that comes from how you're mounting your hangers and how long of a shackle you're running. So if you were to take factory Xterra leaf springs and go from spring under to spring over, you're going to get 4+ inches of lift. That spring is meant to ride where it rides, and then you're moving your axle underneath of it. But those springs are not made to handle the load in a spring over fashion. So you're going to have things like axle wrap and a bouncy ride, and your shackle angles are going to be messed up, and your springs aren't going to last very long. So spring over springs, and this cracks me up because you go on like a Frontier page and everyone says how flat their springs are. They were flat the day they brought it off the lot.
Yes.
So they had a little bit of arch to them, but spring over leaf springs don't have a ton of arch.
Oh, and look at any Chevy pickup truck. I mean, they're the same way. They're just flat as can be. And that I love watching new people that bought a brand new 2018 Frontier. I love just reading the pages on Facebook of, man, my leaves are already flat. And you're like,
yeah,
they've never been curved, guy.
Flat. Yeah, it was flat when it rolled off the assembly line, too, so you're okay.
And some of that, too, is for ride comfort, Like, we want our modern vehicles. Pickup trucks, when my first ride in a 70s, whatever it was, old Silverado my dad had, it rode horrible. I mean, it would just beat the crap out of you, but that's what people thought pickup trucks were supposed to do. And then sometime around the early 2000s, they were like, well, Toyota's selling a ton of these trucks. What was their secret? And their secret was they made a truck that didn't beat the crap out of you. So everybody's went to these soft rides, and especially midsize. Well, it doesn't need to tow a ton anyways, so.
Right. Well, and it really doesn't take much to add a fair amount of capacity to like those newer trucks, but you're exactly right. Those are all about comfort. Mm-hmm. So, of course, when you fill the back with 100 bags of mulch, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
sag, and the leaf springs are going to look flat. That's what they were designed to do and be.
Right. My poor company truck's a 17, man, and it's all the gear I keep in the bed of that thing, and the topper, it's big, heavy fiberglass. Like, it drags now, and I was towing around our company four-wheeler today, and it looked like a brodozer and a half, man, and it was probably bottomed out. And I'm just like, God, I need to get these people to upgrade these vehicles. The mod bug gets you, man, and even with your personal vehicles. And I know you bought a new Ford or a newer Ford Flex, and I know it's hit you a little bit even with that vehicle. Once you go down these paths of whether you're driving a 300Z, 370, whatever you're driving, once you modify your first vehicle, forget ever owning like a factory vehicle again.
Well, and I've got more things. I won't talk about it all day, but I have more things done to my daily driver already than I'm even willing to admit. But even like my wife has, the more and more I've gotten into this, she's grown to have an appreciation for it, and she understands the benefits to some of these modifications. So her truck now, it has a little bit of a lift on it, and it has upgraded rear load carrying springs and things like that.
The EcoBoost has been lifted?
It's lifted a whole inch.
Hey, that's
I had to put I put new coilovers on the front, and it was to get Bilsteins all the way around. I got them on sale, so I lifted the front about an inch, and then I put some, I don't even know what they're called. It's kind of like a helper spring, but it's actually a coil spring that goes on the leaf springs. So that way when we tow the Xterra with it, it doesn't sag.
Right. Well, and what's your because you bought, of course, this isn't Ford Nation podcast, but and other than his off-road vehicle, somehow Luke's been converted. It seems to be a Ford man, which would make my buddy Jim super happy. But you changed jobs and you went full time with 515, and you needed a company or you needed a vehicle because you're losing one, and you bought the rare bird of Ford Flexes and.
Yes, it's and I had a talk with Holden because at the end of the day I love Nissan and I love their products. They just don't have anything that has that super fun to drive factor, but I can put a car seat and my family in my car and go. A Pathfinder probably would fit that criteria, but at the end of the day there's nothing that wows me about that.
Are you saying driving a CVT transmission vehicle wouldn't wow you in those new Pathfinders?
When I bought a brand new Sentra in 2007, and the CVT was like the coolest thing in the world. I would get my friend in the seat next to me and be like, "Watch this," and then you just see the car redline at 6,000 RPMs and stay there until you let off, and everyone's like, "Wow, this is really neat," but. It has its place, but it's just not fun to drive. The Ford Flex hauls 7 people. It's got a twin-turbo V6. It's all-wheel drive. It weighs like 4,600 pounds, and it's so ridiculously fast, it's unreal.
So what you're saying is we're going to see you on that Netflix show Fastest Car next season, right?
I might. I don't know. Where do you apply for that one? I've got a tuner on it already, so it's running 18 pounds of boost. So Nissan really just needs to get into this turbo game.
Well, I do think you're going like they are getting there. And you know what's funny about it is like Toyota, Nissan, they owned the turbos and the supercharger game for so long, and now it's like Ford all of a sudden is like, no, that's our game now. Right.
Well, you can buy and. I don't know that you can actually buy a Ford that doesn't come with a turbo on it. I mean, you can buy some, but it's an option for every vehicle. But like the twin turbo 300Z, that was like the king. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants a twin turbo Z still to this day. So when they came out with the new SR Sentra that has a turbo, I'm like, well, it's a good looking car. I mean, Corbin has a little Sentra.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, you can get them in I think they're a 6-speed, but it's got a whole whopping 180 horsepower. There's no excitement there for me.
Well, I think you're caught up on the horsepower aspect of that because I think for as light as that car is, I haven't got to test drive one yet. I know I'm going down to see Holden to do some YouTube stuff soon. And that one's on my list of wanting to drive. But I think for the body to weight ratio, that probably is a little fun car. The 6-speed.
And that could be true. And
even the Juke tried to be something fun, and just they never were fully in with that vehicle.
Right. And I agree with that. When I started hearing about... Well, what was weird about the Juke, though, was to get the turbo, you had to be in the highest trim level. So it priced it out of a 20-something to be able to buy it and treat it as a fun little tuner-type car.
Right.
And you're probably right. That Sentra probably is a lot of fun to drive. The whole EcoBoost thing caught me by storm because the aftermarket is massive, and they're incredibly easy to work on, and they have a ton of support, and parts are dirt freaking cheap.
Well, let me tell you about the EcoBoost that trips me out is good old boy. I'm amazed how quickly good old boy gave up his V8 to jump on the EcoBoost. Like, dude, those guys are all in with that, man.
Oh, I know. Well, and all it took was like for a few of them to finally just buy one, and they're like, this tows like my diesel did, but it gets good. They don't get excellent gas mileage, but if you treat them right, they get pretty good gas mileage. And I don't know. I got one as a rental truck, and I was going 30 miles an hour, and I gave it some gas just to simply merge into traffic, and it spun the tires.
Wow.
And I have been obsessed with these things ever since. It's a great power plant.
All right, so my Nissan guys, Brent and the gang, and Wendy, you hear this? He was a Nissan guy, and like he just needed a little bit of that, the 4.0 V6 with a turbo would be perfect. So come on, guys, let's at least bring Luke. Do it for Luke. Okay, that's this week's hashtag. Do it for Luke. Make a new Titan with a 4.0 in a turbo.
Or that little, I think it's a 4-cylinder that Nissan makes, where the guy is holding it in one hand.
Oh yeah,
and it's a little turbo
4-cylinder
making 400 horsepower. Let's bring the IDX back. We'll actually make the IDX, throw that motor in it, and I'll go buy one.
Well. So as it seems, we've wrapped up the SAS talk.
Yeah.
Before we get too far, because there's a couple Nissan questions I do want to ask you. But before we get out of the SAS, and we'll wrap this up with that, what are some of the websites? Because you were talking about Rough Stuff and those guys. If you are going to SAS your vehicles, you better get used to that name, because they make a lot of cool, just custom stuff you can do custom parts with. Who are some of the websites you would recommend for people that were going to do it?
You're going to have to Google the exact address. I think it's Rough Stuff Specialties. They make nothing but do-it-yourself parts. So when you're doing your axle, you're going to need like shock mounts and different tabs and different gussets. They're a really good resource. I've called them on the phone. They're incredibly helpful. Same with Barnes 4-wheel drive. Same type of outfit. They make do-it-yourself parts. And even if you're going to do something like building your own bumper, those guys have tons of stuff that can help you with that. Nissan Nut, like I said, if you drive a Nissan and you want to lift it or do something to it, he has so much information on there, it's ridiculous. And then you can check me out at Lifestyle Off-Road on Facebook. I can send you my complete solid axle list. Check out 515 Racing. We're doing things like offering a intro to four-wheeling class to help get people into this sport and help grow the sport of four-wheeling. Other than that, you just really have to research these old forums. It's like I said, and I'll say it again and again, Facebook is not a great resource for building a solid axle Nissan.
No way, man. No way. Really? Because that's one of my most popular shows that I did with Rugged Rocks, and it has to be popular for a reason. So you're telling me Facebook is not a good resource for that?
Yeah, it just isn't. Now, they've changed the format a little bit, so you can go into the Facebook groups and you can search topics, and you can read through those and pick and choose what you think has good information and what's beneficial. So that is helpful. But the pictures prove itself. If you can still find pictures on a forum, you will be able to tell who's right from wrong and what is your good resource for this information.
Right. So check those out, and definitely check 515 Racing out. You guys got a bunch of cool T-shirts and stuff that are just, they're just cool T-shirts. And if you need stickers or whatever, hit Luke up. Luke owes me a couple shirts now that I'm going to remind him about if I think about it. Some new podcast T-shirt shirts. But so let's get to the Nissan brand before we wrap this up. You were kind of hinting at they don't have anything sort of exciting right now, and of course your beloved Ford at the moment just announced that they were doing sort of away with all but maybe one car.
Right.
Where is, besides the IDX, and I think that is long gone from ever happening, where can Nissan be exciting again?
Well, and I know that they've heard this time and time again, but they need to bring back a rugged SUV. I would love to see Nissan appreciate the off-road market like Toyota does, and I hate to compare the two, but Toyota does the whole TRD program because they know that there's a whole 10% of their market that uses a vehicle for that. And so they're going to make those trucks all day long to support that 10%. Nissan builds a product that is just as good, if not better, for a lesser price point. They always have. You always could compare an Xterra or a Pathfinder to a 4Runner, and it was cheaper all day long. Same with a Frontier and a Tacoma, but you still have that value. My dad daily drives a 2014 Pro 4X. It has like 115,000 miles on it, and he loves that truck to death. It's been great to him. I've got a 2004 Xterra that's old as dirt and has been beat up and put away wet so many times it's unreal, but it still starts, it runs, it drives, it's fun. They don't need I really don't think you need a vehicle that has leather and heated seats and power everything. Just make something basic that all these overland people can throw a rooftop tent on and go. It just has to be durable and fun to drive.
Well, they do seem to, I will say they do seem to not understand the off-road market, but they are sort of curious about like overlanding, because like, you know, and this is a debate for a whole nother show of overlanding versus off-roading. But they do have a few builds now for that. So it's like they're sort of, I mean, I don't even see Toyota really doing what Nissan's done in that.
Right.
But,
and I'll agree with that. They understand it to a degree, because otherwise they wouldn't offer things either like the Pro 4X. The fact that they offer trucks with a locking rear differential and the skid plates and the good Bilstein shocks, that puts you leaps and bounds ahead of even, I mean, Chevy had to fight to come out with that ZR2. Sure, it's kind of neat, but that thing's so dang expensive at the end of the day. I would go buy a Pro 4X Frontier instead of it any day,
right,
every day.
Well, and then a lot of that's computer controlled.
In magnetic, funky suspension.
Yeah. The only thing I will say for that truck is to be able to get it in a diesel, which I'm not sold on what they're calling a Duramax diesel, but to be able to get it in that platform, I mean, yeah, you're $50,000 for a mid-sized truck, but you are that is sort of the wet dream of off-road vehicles.
Yes, and it is. I teeter back and forth on how important a small diesel is. Diesel just isn't what it used to be. It used to be this powerful, fun to drive platform, but now because of all the regulations, now there's a lot of added maintenance expense. Mm-hmm. A little 2.8 Cummins or whatever it is that they've toyed with in the Frontier, I'm sure it can be an absolutely great truck, but maybe you drop it down to a 3.5 liter V6, something that's proven, and maybe you throw a little turbo on it or something and just add some pep and efficiency and make it a little more fun to drive.
Well, for diesel versus gas, gas has made headways of being more efficient, and obviously it is worried about environmental concerns, it is a cleaner fuel to burn. Yeah. But the real key for that is just like your 3.5 or whatever you have EcoBoost is turbo. Turbo is the difference maker for that.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be turned up. It just needs to make up kind of on the back end of things, help spool that motor up and help pump some more gas in there and get it out of the system quicker so that you can add that extra power. And it's really kind of funny with our Ford truck. You pop the hood where a 6.2 liter supercharged V8 can sit perfectly fine, and you see this rinky-dink little 3.5 liter V6. I mean, it's a whole 2 liters bigger than my little tiny Xterra is, and It's a big old full-size truck.
Right. Well, so obviously, trucks for Nissan is where you would see. Is there any cars everybody knows the 370s way past, much like the Frontier, the 70s past its prime, and I mean, I would agree with you. Like if you think about it, they make practical cars, but they're not making what sort of got them through the 90s. They're not making any enthusiast cars.
Right. And it could probably be argued a little bit that maybe the Maxima is a little bit of an enthusiast car.
If it was rear-wheel drive. Give me
What?
a rear-wheel drive in that car and all day long.
Oh, yeah. That would be... Well, don't they have an Infiniti that's rear-wheel drive?
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be basically the same?
Well, they're all basically the same anyways.
Right. My problem is the back seat in a Maxima just isn't real big.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm excited to see what they're going to do with the new Altima. My family's had, I don't know, 10 of them, different Altimas between my brother and his family and my parents and myself. I mean, those are great cars all day long. You get one of those with the V6, and it actually is fairly fun to drive. So maybe if you just add... I saw an SER Altima the other day. That was my dream car for a long time, but It was incredibly hard to find. Maybe they go back down those routes. Maybe when you put Nismo or Spec V or SER on a car, you mean it, and it's actually performance-driven versus... different wheels.
Well, and like even with Nismo, they don't even know. Like, I know it's a performance division, but like half the time you don't even know what they do anymore. If it's not a GTR, like forget what Nismo means to a brand. But I'm really hoping from what Holden's told us about the Frontier is like that they're going to take the Pro 4X and sort of turn it into their off-road Nismo brand. Like it's be a brand of their vehicle.
Yeah, and that'd be fantastic. I mean, I'm sure... I really don't mean to keep going back to Ford, but they're a prime example. With their whole Raptor division, they started leaking things about doing a Raptor Ranger, and people are lining up to try and buy this thing before they've even seen it.
Right, and everything I know from the Australian version is it's more of a just a outside package. It's not really an upgrade to the engine.
Yep. And I mean, Nissan obviously has a good partnership with Bilstein. That's what I run on all my vehicles. They work well. They're more expensive than some, but they're also cheaper than a lot too. So they've got a pretty good thing down with their suspension systems on these trucks. They've got the locker. It just really needs that fun to drive factor.
Yeah. And, if they, like Chevy did with the Cyclones and all that stuff, man, just do some outrageous, whatever, if it's the Terra and you call it the Pathfinder Hero, whatever they're going to do with that.
Yep.
Do some truck that you're going to sell $500 a year. Who cares? Because you're going to charge way more than the truck's worth anyways. And just make some performance, make a Nismo off-road performance vehicle.
Well, the thing is, when you do that, you develop a following, and you start to enhance your brand with a whole new image of what your company can do. So maybe you're right. Maybe you only sell 500 of them. Maybe they come out with, we'll call it the new Pathfinder, but you can buy it with some turboed V6 and an awesome off-road package. You're going to start seeing people get those and tinker with them and post videos all over hell about, well, mine's fast. Well, mine goes anywhere. Well, mine's lowered. And you're going to start a whole lifestyle and an image of your brand that is not there right now.
Yeah. You make a good vehicle, and that's all people know you for is it's a cheap, dependable vehicle. But, you were with going back to your Altima thing to wrap up, with the new four-cylinder they're doing, strictly turbo and stuff, maybe there's a chance there that it takes that next level like you were talking about, and that it lets, because the tuner guy hits those cars hard, and the tuner guy likes to modify his vehicle, and so maybe that new engine is where that tuner guy hops in.
Yep, absolutely, and I think that's something they've needed for a long time.
Right. Well, man, I know you were a busy guy, and you've given us a bunch of time here, and I got to quit drooling over the truck over your shoulder and stuff. And But so where can we find you if people want to get some cool shirts or the helmets that you sell or whatever? Where can we do that at?
So we're on just 515 Racing, Facebook, Instagram, and then 515racing.com is our website. You can find my phone number, email, anything on all those, and just let me know what you need and how I can help.
Right, and I know you guys also you're helping clubs. You want to chat on that just for a second before I let you go?
So, yep. So what we do is we have a promotion page up on our website, and it just says club codes. So we work with clubs that are going out and serving any sort of purpose to try and help communities in any which way, shape, or form. Maybe you're like Windrock, where you aim towards helping the beginner trying to learn how to four-wheel. Maybe you're trying to get people into autocross or snowmobiling, and you're just really doing it for the greater good. We will set up a club code for you, so when people check out, they can add that code to their cart, and then we will take a portion of the profits made from that sale, and we'll actually send it back to those clubs so we can help keep them going.
Well, that's awesome, man. I know it's rare to find like your what you're trying to do is just rare among companies, but then to give back a little bit, and it's not costing anybody anything. It's just you're trying to help get your name out. They're buying your cool gear anyways, so so that's all it is. We're trying to have you help us, but then we're trying to help you in return for just doing a good thing. Right. So what this summer, I know you guys are all over the place with snowmobiling in the winter. What's 515 doing?
We have an autocross race coming up in July. We have a truck pull coming up next weekend. Got a couple car shows. Be heading down to Windrock, and then really we're already into snowmobile season. Right.
Well, man, I really appreciate your time being on here, and we could do this probably for another 3 or 4 hours, but I think the 2 hours we've locked in here are pretty good. I know Danny and them they're gonna be like, hey man, can we have some time too? So but anyways,
I think we tried to keep this at an hour, but we ran a little late.
Yeah, just a little bit. We had some audio technical difficulties too, some battery issues. I got to up mine to a Duralast, I think, and I'll be okay. But, man, Gail, go check out 515 Racing, and if you need stickers or whatever, hit Lifestyle Offroad up and show Luke and them some love on their socials, man. Well, Luke, we appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, there you have it. I know that was a long one and kind of all over the place, and that's a topic. It's just it's a topic that it's hard to kind of to be specific on, not for our generalizing for our audience. I know I have a big Xterra Frontier crowd, but hopefully you guys got something from that. I know if you have questions, man, there's a couple good Facebook groups for sassing, and I know we talk generalizations. So it's if you have questions, hit me. You can hit us up at the podcast or Mr. Luke Pankow over at 515 Racing or Lifestyle Offroad. Probably Lifestyle Offroad would be a better one for these questions. And we can. Luke has a list, and I'll try to get this list on the website or on our Facebook page, so you guys can, if you want to kind of look at it. It's I haven't got to take mine out too much just yet. I'm still working out some bugs, but it is the way to go if you're really wanting to really do rock crawling or whatever with even if you're going to make it a buggy, of course you want to do this, but just taking it to the next level. If I were to do it all over again, I would not use the blue painted parts. I would probably just do like Luke did and just go leaf. I think it's a more stable for daily driving than the coils, but that's for another show, I guess. But hopefully our audience got something from that. It's fun to do. Clearly, it was fun to do because we talked for quite a while, and We got Luke's opinions on Nissan in general, and I respect him. I don't always agree with him, but that's okay. I'm a fanboy here, so clearly. So next time, Danny and Holden will be back. We just didn't have enough room on this show, not for those big deals. But they will be back, and I know Danny's got a great interview lined up. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Gambler 500, I think is what it's called. But he's got a guy that participates in it that's very Nissan. So we got that coming up. I'm always on the lookout for more GTR people. I know that was you guys really came out in force for that episode. Always looking for more. I'm looking to talk to some friends from down under, Mr. David Garcia. I'm looking at you down there. For one, you just want to talk to a guy whose name is David. I mean, they're the coolest ever, right? But when there's an Australian with the last name Garcia, I'm assuming it's pronounced the same in Australia. But you just want to talk to that cat, man. And I know he's got just chatting with him a little bit. He's got an interesting story. So we got that. There's a race team in South Africa. I know we've been trying for years to get on here, and it's a timing issue when you're trying to deal with people around the world. But we got that coming up. We've got all kinds of things coming up. Like I said, we've got our YouTube stuff. If you haven't yet, I know there's not a ton of content you're going to want to watch on our YouTube channel, but if you'll go over to Nissan Podcast on YouTube, give us the old subscribe button. I need 100 subscriptions to do live content, and we want to be able to do these podcasts live on there if we can. So please, if you're just a casual YouTuber, go over there, click it. If you're more of a power YouTuber, and click it anyways. We're not wearing you out with ads on there or anything. We want to do all kinds of product reviews. I know I want to talk more with Danny about Danny's YouTube channel, Doug Rudex. He's got that race truck. Man, it's going. So maybe we'll get an update for this month on Danny, where he's at with that thing. Holden's always all over the map, man. He's been traveling like crazy, mostly Nissan related. And also want to, before I let you guys go, I want to say Happy Father's Day here in the States to all the hardworking fathers out there, and even the hardworking moms who may be doing double duty as mom and dad. Either or. And I know there's some dads that do the same thing. They are all of it. Hope it was a good one for you. It was only a few days ago, but I hope it was a good one for you. And wherever you are in the country, I hope you're having a great time. I hope you enjoy your Nissan. I hope you do it safely. Please, if you're going to drink, let somebody else drive. Can never say that enough. And we got holidays coming up. We got July 4th here in the States coming up, which is always a big drinking and driving time. There's Uber, man. Uber and Lyft, guys. It's safer way to do it. Just can't talk enough about safety. But anyways. So from all things Nissan here in Middle Tennessee to wherever you are, I want to say thank you for listening to us. Click that Amazon link on our website. And we are out. Peace, everybody. Love y'all.